All right. So, a couple of days ago, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, decided to essentially launch a complete and total siege, as well as an invasion of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, which I believe is the largest hospital complex in the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Now, keep in mind, over the last month or so, the hospital system within Gaza has either been in total and complete collapse, or it has been on the verge of collapse due to a lack of electricity and fuel and water and medical supplies and all of the rest of that. So the hospital system was already suffering before this kind of a thing took place. But then we had Israel decide to go in and to launch this attack on Al-Shifa, where thousands of people were being treated as a result of the consequences of their bombing campaign, and thousands more were taking refuge at this hospital, because I guess maybe they figured this would be one of the only safe places within Gaza, as everything else is being bombed into oblivion. Unfortunately, they were incorrect, and this hospital was not safe. There is absolutely nowhere within the entirety of the Gaza Strip that is safe for innocent men, women, and children to avoid this Israeli onslaught. And so, before we get to the results of what Israel said that they found during this raid, I want to show you guys the before, animations that were coming out. So this was posted directly by the IDF on Twitter. This is the animation that they put together, showing what they claim to be, this absolutely gargantuan Hamas tunnel network under Al-Shifa, where you have, this looks like, I don't know if this is supposed to be like fuel tanks, or if this is supposed to be like a storage of like TNT or explosives or something. And then you have this, this command center down here where you got laptops on the side and a meeting room where Hamas is planning their shenanigans and all of that. But just an absolutely massive tunnel network here under Al-Shifa. And this claim that this was the Hamas HQ, this was the nerve center for their entire operations, was also echoed by the United States government, including Joe Biden himself. So he was asked about this by a reporter just a couple days ago, and they asked, what kind of evidence does the U.S. have that Hamas has a command center under Al-Shifa Hospital? He said, quote, "I can't tell you. I won't tell you." Okay, and the reporter asked, do you feel confident based on what you know? And he said, yes, of course I feel confident. So you believe that there's a gigantic Hamas nerve center, command center, whatever you want to call it, below this hospital. You are therefore giving them the implicit permission to bomb this hospital, to raid this hospital, to invade this hospital, to cut off the people who are inside and around this hospital from getting access to the medical supplies, the fuel, the electricity that they need to survive. So you're giving them the green light to go and do whatever the fuck they want to do with this hospital. And you're basing that off of what? Exactly. Secret evidence that you can't tell us about, you won't tell us about? This is where we're at right now. Now, I call me crazy here, but I think that it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that the evidence that Joe Biden or the State Department or the U.S. government broadly may have seen could have come directly from the IDF, and it doesn't seem like they would have any capacity to have alternative forms of evidence that this kind of a, massive command center would be under Al-Shifa. It seems like they're just taking whatever the IDF says at face value, and so they're repeating these claims. Again, giving the green light for Israel to go in and to do whatever they wanted at this hospital, right? They could have put pressure on them to not go into this hospital. They could have tried to keep this a safe place. Now, I want to make it explicitly clear, right? Under international law, which is something that the Joe Biden administration has insisted that Israel is following in accordance with, and they have, said, oh, well, we hope Israel is going to follow in accordance with international law. Well, under international law, the standards for bombing a hospital, which is something Israel was doing in the days before they invaded it, or taking over or doing a siege on a hospital, that's something that, believe it or not, takes a pretty high threshold, in order to justify. You don't just get to go and do this and then try to justify it after the fact with whatever paltry evidence that you come up with. You have to have very stringent guidelines in place for targeting something like a hospital where thousands of people are trying to get treatment from the rest of your bombing campaign, And so they made this massive claim that there's this huge command center under it. Now, what did we actually get? Well, we're going to get to that here in a second. But I also want to point this out here in terms of the humanitarian consequences of this raid on Al-Shifa, as pointed out here by Jackson Hickle. Not Jackson Hinkle, Jackson Hickle. He says, the director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza reports that the siege by Israeli forces has now killed everyone in the intensive care unit. We are left with nothing, no power, no food, no fuel, no water. With every passing minute, we are losing a life. This is what they came up with, Now, I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I've seen other pictures. I've seen other videos where the IDF has done sort of walkthroughs and shown what they've claimed. This isn't the entirety of it. but this is a good picture in terms of what they claim to have found in Al-Shifa, okay? So here you can see sort of what looks to be like a vest of sorts, and then you have a couple magazines back here, you got a couple grenades back here, you have handcuffs right here, you got what looks to be like a couple short books or maybe pamphlets over here, or magazines or something, and then you have some like walkie-talkies or radios, you have some Qurans, it looks like, and then this, I'm not even fucking kidding here, they posed for this picture. They put this on the table, they posed for this picture. This is a box of dates. Like the food, dates, okay? That's what that is in the top right corner. This reminds me so much of US police who will go out and they'll do a raid on some, minority community here in the United States or whatever. And then they'll take a picture like this where they're posing in front of the camera and on a table with all of their evidence laid out that they managed to get from this. And it'll be like one revolver on the table with like a dime bag of weed, okay? And maybe like a couple other things sprinkled in there. And they'll turn around and they'll be like, we just did a massive drug bust. And it's like, really, did you? It doesn't seem like you really got that much there. And that's what this reminds me of. I mean, a box of fucking dates. Okay, there was another picture that was floating around where they had a couple of cans of WD-40 as a part of what was on the table. And then there was another picture where they had like 10 AK-47s, which they claimed that they found inside of Al-Shifa Hospital. You had a video that was going around of one of these IDF spokesmen who was basically trying to give evidence that their raid was justified and all of that. And, he was going behind like MRI machines and he was pulling out like, a go bag is what it's called, right? In military terms, I guess, where it would have like an AK-47 in it and then like maybe a vest and a couple other small things, gadgets and whatever the case may be inside of that bag. This does not coincide with what you were claiming was inside and underneath this hospital. You were claiming this was Hamas HQ, Hamas headquarters, right? And this is what you found. A box of fucking dates, a couple Qurans, some walkie-talkies, some magazines, handcuffs, and then a couple of grenades and magazines. Does this look like Hamas headquarters to you? I mean, if they were correct in their analysis in what they were putting forward in videos like this, you'd think they may have found more than that. And so now I want to move on to this. This was shockingly a very good BBC News report that was put out on some of the inconsistencies on the reporting and the evidence that was put forward by the IDF as a result of the Al-Shifa hospital raid. So let's go ahead and watch this. I'll put this on 1.25 speed. Let's watch this little report here.
Israel described the Al-Shifa hospital as the main headquarters for Hamas's terrorist activity. This IDF animation, posted in late October, claims to represent a Hamas tunnel system underneath the hospital. But having been inside Al-Shifa since early Wednesday, Israel's yet to produce evidence of the tunnels. It has allowed the BBC and Fox News to film at the hospital, though only locations of Israel's choice.
This is what they found.
Israel also released its own 7-minute video, which BBC Verify has analysed. A watch, visible in that video, suggests it was filmed a few hours before the BBC arrived. And this IDF video...
Okay. So that gives you a little bit of an indication there, right? So they allowed some select journalists to go in and to tape some things. Now we're going to circle back around to this because they did bring forward, the BBC here brought forward some evidence that maybe some of this evidence that was laid out there for the reporters was manipulated, to say the least. But I mean, think about that. They went through, they did their whole walkthrough video with that IDF spokesperson, and that took place hours before they allowed reporters to go in and look at some of this stuff, right? So none of this is inherently reliable. Okay, they had time to go in, to plant things, to change things, to do whatever the case may be. But I also want to make it clear, even if they did find some fucking go bags that had an AK-47 in it and a couple of hand grenades or something, that is not the same as claiming that this is the nerve center for Hamas, that this is Hamas headquarters right here in Al-Shifa. That's some throwaway shit. There are, your average Texas man here in the United States has more guns in his house than what Israel showed during the raid of what was supposed to be Hamas headquarters. All right, so the idea that like this is matching up in any way, shape, or form, regardless of what they manipulated here, okay, even if they did find everything that they have presented to the world and shown that they have found, let's just accept that and think that that's accurate, even that would not be in line with what they originally claimed and what the US claimed was Hamas headquarters here. But let's continue.
Was posted, then deleted, then reposted. This time without a section referring to an Israeli soldier who'd been held hostage.
I don't know when this was used the last time.
Also in the video, we see a room with an MRI machine.
And if you zoom in, and we get some light over here, what you'll be able to see is military equipment.
The BBC was shown the same room. And what we see in the two videos doesn't precisely match. For example, there's one gun in the IDF video, two by the time of the BBC footage. Israel has told BBC Verify this is because more weaponry and terrorist assets were discovered throughout the day.
And as always, an AK-47.
Israel also says it's been...
Even that doesn't make any sense. So you found other weapons in what? Other portions of the hospital? And then when the reporters were coming through, you put some of those other weapons you found in other portions of the hospital behind that MRI machine to give the indication that it was slightly more weapons? I mean, none of this is adding up in any way, shape, or form.
Video is a single shot with no edits. But this appears to be an edit. We don't know the reasons for that edit, nor how significant it is. The IDF, though, says suggestions it's manipulating the media are incorrect. The IDF video also shows military equipment in other locations, though we can't verify how it came to be there. And what we see in this IDF video doesn't equate to Israel's description of Al-Shifa as an operational command center for Hamas. The US is using a different phrase, saying Al-Shifa was used as a command and control node. That implies a much smaller facility. Israel is adamant this hospital was a command center, but for now, at least, it's either not found supporting evidence or it's not sharing it.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and venture to say that they knew that this wasn't, the animation version of a Hamas command center that they initially put out there. I'm going to go ahead and venture to say that they knew that from the beginning. And this entire campaign that they're launching in Gaza right now is not actually about eradicating Hamas or doing a targeted campaign against Hamas militants. This is about putting a stranglehold on the entirety of the Palestinian population in Gaza. That's what this is about. This is about making the entirety of the Gaza Strip unlivable, right? I mean, we've seen just so many comments from Israeli politicians, from guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and Benjamin Netanyahu and Isaac Herzog and so many other Israeli politicians and pundits. It's not up in the air anymore. The goal here is ethnic cleansing. The goal here is punishment of the entirety of the Palestinian population. This isn't a targeted campaign to go after Hamas. It's not a campaign to remove Hamas from power. That's not what this is about. This is about collective punishment. This is about being a part of a broader, ongoing, decades-long movement to eradicate the Palestinian people from this region that Israel feels like they have the right to be in control of. And I've seen recent statements that have come out showing that after, this current operation, this offensive into Gaza is done with, that Israel feels like they are going to have the right to maintain essentially a complete and total military operational control over the entirety of Gaza as well as the West Bank. Okay, which, I mean, the West Bank isn't even controlled by Hamas, right? That's an entirely different situation. You've seen drastically escalating settler violence in the West Bank since October 7th, where because you have, people in power right now, like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, you have this taking advantage of the chaos right now to dramatically expand the violence in the West Bank as well. And so I think that this is just part of the broader project that we have all been witnessing for decades and decades and decades now. It's very clear what the goal is for the Israeli government. It has nothing to do really with Hamas. I mean, this is an ethnic cleansing that we have been witnessing. And so, this is, for anybody who's confused about this, I just want to make some other things clear here, right? So this was pointed out by Ryan Grimm. He says the implicit suggestion that they might produce evidence of Hamas activity sometime in the future, rather than right after the raid, ought to make news organizations deeply skeptical of what they later produce. Not that it will, but it should. So this is basically what Israel is saying now. They're saying, we have no more evidence to provide that this was a Hamas HQ right now, but maybe in the future we'll provide some shoddy evidence, I guess, and presumably the U.S. media will eat that up and, shat it out the backside of themselves to the American people and try to pretend as if it's somewhat legitimate. Obviously, I think that should be taken skeptically, as pointed out here by Ryan Grimm. We also had this here from Matt Binder, which I think, again, it just backs up the point that, this isn't about going after Hamas, right? So we were told the entire time throughout this Israeli offensive, okay, we're just going to attack mostly the northern strip of Gaza. Everybody in the north, you have to pack up your shit, you have to leave, you have to flee south, right? They told over 1 million people to flee the northern strip of Gaza and go to the south. We have 1.7 million Gazans who have been displaced as a result of this Israeli offensive so far. Not that they even, the word displaced doesn't even do it justice because there's nothing to return to. Gaza City has been essentially obliterated at this point. The northern strip has been bombed into oblivion at this point. They've dropped more bombs than we did in 1 week in Gaza. Israel dropped more bombs than the United States did in the heaviest year of bombardment of Afghanistan. So there's not even anything necessarily to return to, okay, which also gives you an indication of like, well, okay, is the goal really here to just eradicate Hamas and let everybody go back to their homes? Well, okay, you just destroyed their homes, so where are they even supposed to return to? But this is another aspect of this, right? So everybody was supposed to flee the north and go to the south of Gaza, right? That's going to be a safe zone, okay? Keep in mind, they never stopped bombing the south of Gaza. They've been bombing the south of Gaza. They have been bombing the escape routes to the south of Gaza throughout the entirety of this offensive. And so we started out with this. Again, the Shifa hospital is not only the largest hospital in Gaza, but it also acts as the main headquarters for Hamas's terrorist activity. Terrorism does not belong in a hospital, and they will uncover all terrorist infrastructure, whatever the fuck. Now we're getting this. Ehud Omer tells me that Hamas command center is now in Khan Yunis, not Shifa Hospital. Khan Yunis, which is in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, is the real headquarters of Hamas. So maybe I guess like the Hamas headquarters like grew legs and it just like traveled from one hospital to another. I would anticipate that Israel is just going to keep flattening every hospital that they see to the ground until they finally find the last one that the Hamas headquarters have fled to or something like that. I mean, this is really what they're trying to pass off as legitimate military operations that a lot of Americans and the U.S. government are just eating up. Now the headquarters is in Khan Yunis, in the south of Gaza. It's not in Al-Shifa anymore. Whoops. It's like they just want us to forget everything that happened over the last couple of weeks and all of the aggressive statements, the animations that we watched, all of this supposed like hardcore evidence giving them a justification to bomb Al-Shifa, to go into Al-Shifa with troops, to cut them off from electricity and fuel and medical supplies. All of that was justified before, and now it's like, oops, it's now in Khan Yunis, which again is in the south of Gaza, and they've already started bombing in this region. There was a massive bombing campaign that took place just a couple of days ago, where a couple dozen people were killed in Khan Yunis as a result of Israeli bombardment. And so now it looks like this is potentially the next area that is going to be targeted by the government of Israel. Again, a couple dozen people, 26 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli air attack on residential neighborhood in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. And so now we have reports that the IDF, that Israel is saying, well, you need to flee the south of Gaza in order to get to safety. Where are they supposed to flee to exactly? Because you're certainly not going to allow them to flee to Israel for safety. Okay, so you want them to what? Go into the Sinai Peninsula, to flee to Egyptian territory, to be ethnically cleansed. That seems to be the suggestion here, right? They're expanding their ground operations right now, that's what the reports say, into the south of Israel. There is nowhere that is safe in Gaza right now. This is what our government is doing. These are the people we're sending weapons to right now. These are the people we're giving diplomatic cover to right now, that are bombing the entirety of this strip into oblivion, that are killing a vast majority innocent men, women, and children, disproportionately children, because, as a reminder, half the population of Gaza are children. This is what they're doing, expanding their operations. There's barely any pressure from this, from the U.S. government, or the international community for that matter, in order to reverse this. I mean, we've had some people like, I think it was Emmanuel Macron called for a ceasefire before Joe Biden. Kind of embarrassing to get outflanked by Emmanuel Macron, but the pressure on Israel is damn near nothing right now, when the motives are very clear in terms of what they want to do. Again, we also have dramatically escalating violence in the West Bank. We have had a significant uptick in the settler terrorism that is backed by the IDF, by the government of Israel, in the West Bank territories. And before even October 7th, 2023 was already the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank territories, as they are continuing to face this onslaught, continuing to face aggressively expanding Israeli settlements. And now we have Israeli forces attacking a hospital in the West Bank. So the West Bank isn't controlled by Hamas, right? But they're still doing this. I saw another video just a couple days ago of them bulldozing. The government of Israel bulldozed a statue that was for Yasser Arafat, okay, previous Palestinian figure and leader, right? They bulldozed a statue, a memorial for Yasser Arafat, okay? That's not a military target. I mean, this is it's an ethnic cleansing. There's no other way to put this, right? Attacking a hospital in the West Bank, which is under basically a fascist military occupation. We also have more rhetoric coming out here. This one was on Anderson Cooper on CNN. former Israeli intelligence chief. And he said, the non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip is really a non-existent term. So there's no such thing as innocent civilians in Gaza, because all of the Gazans voted for Hamas. And as we have seen on the 7th of October, most of the population in the Gaza Strip are Hamas. So, I mean, this is just completely made up, genocidal bullshit rhetoric. Okay, first of all, most of the Gazans, or he said all of the Gazans, not even most of the Gazans, all of the Gazans voted for Hamas. We've seen the statistical breakdowns on this, right? Roughly 7% of the current population of Gaza actually cast a vote for Hamas, right? He says all of the population of Hamas, or all of the population of Gaza voted for Hamas. Half the population of Gaza is children, right? So a significant portion of the population wasn't even alive when these elections took place, okay, back in the early 2000s. So that would be number one. But number two, even though he's inaccurate in that claim, what is the implication there? The implication is that if any group of people votes for a government, they are then complicit and guilty of the crimes of that government. So now we're going back to the argument again of like, okay, so every single American who voted for George W. Bush, who went into Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people, everybody who voted for George W. Bush in the United States deserved to be bombed and or killed in any way, shape, or form by Iraqis, right? Iraqis have the justification, under this logic, to come over here to the United States and to blow up the houses of anybody who voted for George W. Bush. That's the logic that's being deployed here. In fact, that's the exact logic that Osama bin Laden used in the 9/11 attacks when he attacked the United States on 9/11. Okay, he said, you guys, you're a supposed democracy, right? You operate under the will of the people. You all voted for these governments who, did and wronged people in the Middle East in one way, shape, or form. And so you are all responsible. So there's no such thing as an innocent civilian. He's using the logic of Osama bin Laden. Okay? And again, following it up here, most of the population of the Gaza Strip are Hamas, right? I mean, we're at the point now where we're edging closer and closer towards 6,000, 7,000 innocent children that have been killed as a part of this bombing campaign. And one of the more fucked up parts about this raid on Al-Shifa is that this was one of the main places where they were actually able to, the Gaza Health Ministry, they were able to track how many casualties have taken place so far. And so you're losing hospital after hospital after hospital to the point where we have not seen serious updates on the casualties out of Gaza over the last couple of days because they're no longer able to give them to us because they have been destroyed, because they don't have the capacity to do that anymore. They're not operating, they're not functional, they're not, they're not able to provide that to us anymore. So who knows what the actual death rate is right now? Who knows how many people have been killed, how many people have been injured or maimed or wounded in one way or another, how many people are stuck under the rubble? I wouldn't be surprised at all if at this point it's upwards of over 20,000 casualties at least. And when I say casualties, I mean like dead, unfortunately. So, I mean, who knows how bad it's gotten as of right now. But this is just a continuation of what we knew was coming. Right, Israel was talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to give these justifications to invade these hospitals, to bomb these hospitals. The U.S. government was backing them and arming them and giving them diplomatic cover throughout the entirety of it. And then we get to the other side and what? You got a fucking table of 10 AK-47s, a couple of magazines, a couple of grenades, a couple of Qurans, a pair of handcuffs, and a box of dates. And that's what is apparently the Hamas headquarters that requires to destroy Hamas, apparently, dropping more bombs in 1 week than the United States did in an entire year of bombing in Afghanistan. So, I mean, again, it's very clear to me what the motivations are here. They're not really hiding it. They're saying it out loud. They don't believe that there is such a thing as an innocent Palestinian civilian. They have an utter disregard for human life as a consequence of this bombing campaign, of this invasion. And I cannot reasonably in my head come to the conclusion that the goal here is anything other than ethnic cleansing. I mean, again, there's nothing really even at this point to return to, especially in the northern portion of Gaza, but soon to be in the southern portion of Gaza as well. They're flattening everything to the ground. They're destroying all of the infrastructure. There's nothing to return to at this point. And so I guess the best that we can do is continue to try to apply pressure on the U.S. government. Call your representatives, I'll have the link down below, ceasefiretoday.com. try to call your representative, try to apply whatever modicum of pressure that you possibly can, go to protest, try to disrupt, even if you're somebody who's out there disrupting arms shipments. I've seen that in a couple of different, instances. Do whatever you fucking can to stop this, because the bloodshed here, the ethnic cleansing here, the genocide here, unfortunately, it is I don't think going to stop without heavy weight applied on the government of Israel by the United States government. And so I guess it's partially our job to try to put that pressure on the government in order to make that happen.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best Politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying